Picture a library, not just any library. The finest one in 14th century England. Vaulted stone ceilings, candles burning in iron brackets, a monk bending over a manuscript written in Latin, carefully copying out a medical text originally composed by a Greek physician who died 1400 years ago. The monk has never seen a patient in his life. He's never set a broken bone or cleaned a wound or talked a woman through a difficult birth in the middle of a February night. But he has read Galen and Hippocrates and Avicenna, and so officially he knows medicine. Now picture a different room, smoky. So smoky your eyes water the moment you walk in. A fire burning in the centre of the floor, no chimney, just a hole in the thatch above letting out maybe half the smoke and keeping in all the warmth. Bundles of dried plants hanging from the ceiling beams. A woman with red, cracked hands moving in the firelight, grinding something between two stones. She doesn't read Latin. She doesn't read anything. She can't. But she knows exactly which plant will stop a wound from going bad. She knows what to give a child whose lungs are rattling with winter illness. She knows the signs that mean a birth is going wrong and what to do when it does. She knows how to keep a family of 5 alive through a winter when the grain runs short and the snow won't stop and the nearest physician is 30 miles away and wouldn't come to your village for any amount of money you'll ever have. Nobody wrote down what she knew. That's the thing. Nobody wrote any of it down. The monk in his library, his knowledge survived. It's in archives, in manuscripts, in academic papers that scholars still argue about today. The woman by the fire, her knowledge almost didn't survive at all. Tonight we're going back to find it, not as scholars looking at manuscripts, not as historians reading accounts. We're living it. Her hands, her fire, her village. Everything she would have known, smelled, grown, and survived. So I make these history stories. And honestly, if you're here for a relaxing sleep experience, and I've just started by describing centuries of erased female medical knowledge, I understand if that's a bit confrontational, but stick with me. We're going somewhere good. Get comfortable. Here we go. Your eyes open before the cock crows, they always do. There's a moment, half a breath maybe, where you exist without knowing anything, without remembering the cold or the season or the list of things that need doing before the light comes. Then it all comes back. The cold comes first. It always comes first. It's March. Not the gentle March people in warmer centuries will romanticize with poems about daffodils. This is the real March of 1347 in a village called Stoneham in the county of Wiltshire in the southwest of England. A March that means the worst of winter is over in theory, but has left its damage behind in practice. Your feet are cold even through the wool, wrapping you've tied around them before sleep. The straw mattress beneath you, a real mattress, not just loose straw on the floor, which marks you as moderately lucky, crinkles when you shift your weight. Your husband Thomas breathes beside you, slow and heavy. He won't wake for another hour. The baby's quiet. You check that first, always. You've learned to register her breathing before you register anything else. She's there, warm in her bundle in the cradle by the hearth. A small sighing sound coming from the darkness. Good. The fire has burned low. You can see that from where you lie. Not the flame. That's gone. But the red glow of the embers still breathing in the centre of the room. If you let it go cold, getting it started again takes time and effort neither you nor the flint wants to spend. You get up, not dramatically, not with a stretch and a yawn. You simply put your feet on the beaten earth floor. Cold, hard, slightly damp in the corner where the wall meets, the ground, and has never quite dried since the autumn, and you stand. Your back pulls. It always pulls. You're 26 years old. You've been pregnant or nursing or recovering from one or the other for most of the last 4 years. Your back knows about it. You ignore it. You've become expert at ignoring it. The floor is dark. Your feet know the path anyway. 3 steps to the hearth. Crouch. You can feel the warmth on your face even before you get close, the way the embers push out a pocket of warmth into the surrounding cold. You feed in the fuel you laid out last night. Small dry pieces, kindling first, then a larger chunk of oak that Thomas split last autumn. The oak will burn slow and hot and carry you through the morning. The fire catches. It sounds like something folding, like pages turning very fast, a soft, rapid crackling that builds into a sound more solid and certain, and then the light comes up, and the cottage that was just darkness and cold and the smell of sleeping bodies becomes a place. You see it now. Your home. One room. Everything in one room. The hearth in the centre or close enough to centre. Your bed. You and Thomas share it with the youngest, who'd been moved to the cradle now that he's old enough to survive the night without being tucked against your body for warmth. The children's pallet against the far wall, where your son William, age 6, and your daughter Agnes, age 4, are still sleeping in a tangle of limbs and shared warmth. The wooden chest that holds your household's important items, a spare blanket, your good wool dress, the document recording your husband's obligations to the lord of the manor, 2 knives, some dried lavender to keep the smell from becoming truly unbearable. Against the walls, shelves, rough wooden boards on pegs, and on them, the things. This is what matters. This is what we came here for. You look at your shelves the way a scholar looks at his library. Bundles of dried herbs tied with rough string hanging from the ceiling beams above and laid flat on the upper shelves. Some brown and crumbling, the old ones from last summer getting near their end. Some still holding colour, the rosemary still silver green, the sage still pale grey, the dried chamomile still holding that warm dusty yellow. Pots and small vessels of things you've prepared, a clay pot with a plug of wax covering it. Inside, a salve you made in the autumn from Laird, and the leaves of a plant the village calls woundwort, though its Latin name, if you knew Latin, would be Stachys sylvatica. You don't know the Latin name. You know that when Thomas cut his hand badly on a scythe blade in September, you packed that cut with a poultice of woundwort, and the cut didn't go angry and red, and he didn't get the fever that follows a bad cut when it goes wrong, and he still has his hand. That's what you know about woundwort. A small bundle wrapped in cloth, dried elderberries from last autumn. They'll go into a decoction if the coughing sickness starts circling the village again, which it does every spring. A basket with last season's dried nettles. Nettles are important. Nettles are almost the first food that comes free in spring, and spring is when you and everyone else in this village are at your lowest, thinnest, most depleted. The grain stores are running short. The preserved pork from the autumn pig is long gone. The animals are thin and giving thin milk, and the nettles come up free from the ground, full of things you don't have words for, but that your body knows it needs desperately, and you eat them, and you feel better. You don't call it nutrition. You don't know that word. You just know that in March, when the nettles come up, you eat them, and your children's colour improves, and the fatigue in your bones lifts a little. The monk in his library copying out his Galenic texts would not recommend nettles. Nettles are peasant food. Nettles are what desperate people eat when they have nothing better. The monk is wrong about this. He's wrong about quite a few things. We'll come back to that. The baby stirs. You cross to her in 3 steps, bend over the cradle, put your hand on her chest. She's warm, not too warm, which is the worry, always, with infants in March. Warm the way a healthy sleeping baby is warm. Her eyes open, unfocus, close again. Not yet. You straighten up, put more wood on the fire, get the pot. The pot is iron, heavy, older than you are. It was your mother's. When you married Thomas and moved from your father's farm to his 3 miles away, you carried almost nothing with you, but the pot came. You fill it from the bucket. The bucket sits by the door and the water in it has a skin of ice on the top. You break it with your knuckle, a quick sharp tap, and scoop out what you need. The ice water goes into the pot. The pot goes on the iron trivet over the fire. While you wait for it to heat, you do the first of the morning's calculations, not profit margins, not trading prices. The calculation that occupies a farmwife's mind in early March 1347 is more fundamental. How much grain is left? You go to the storage corner. There's a wooden bin there, the lid fitted to keep out rodents, though it never keeps them all out. You lift the lid. The smell hits you. Old grain, slightly musty. The smell of last year compressed into something dense and earthen. You look at what's there. Your hand goes in, cups a measure, lets it fall. Enough for maybe 3 weeks if you're careful. You close the lid. 3 weeks. The fields are ploughed and planted. Thomas and the other men of the village turned the earth 2 weeks ago, working in the cold mud. Everyone together on the Lord's strips and then on their own. The seeds are in. But seeds don't become bread in 3 weeks. Seeds become bread in months. You're feeding 5 people on 3 weeks of grain. This is not panic. This is mathematics. The mathematics of a household where the wrong answer means children who don't eat. You walk to the shelf and look at what else you have. The dried beans, less than you'd like, but some. The onions hanging in their rope braid from the rafter, getting soft now but still good. The hard cheese wrapped in cloth. A small wheel, mostly gone. The salted pork fat, which is mostly fat and very little pork, but fat has calories and calories are what you need. And the wild things. This is the part the monk in his library doesn't understand and wouldn't bother to think about. The wild things that bridge the gap between winter stores and summer abundance. The gap that kills people who don't know how to navigate it. The gap that you and every farmwife in England knows as intimately as you know your own heartbeat. Right now, in the hedgerows and the edges of the fields and the damp places near the stream, things are beginning to come up. Nettles, as mentioned. Also hawthorn buds, the young leaves bright, green and edible, tasting like fresh grass and life. Sorrel with its sharp sour bite growing flat against the ground in the meadow. Watercress in the stream shallows. Chickweed in the garden beds, which everyone else considers a weed and you consider a vegetable. In 4 weeks, maybe 6, the woods will be providing again. The trees won't leaf out for a while yet, but the ground plants are already stirring. Ramsons, wild garlic, in the damp hollow under the big oaks on the hill, wood sorrel, ground elder. You know where everything is, not from reading a book about foraging. There are no books about foraging in your world, and you couldn't read them if there were. You know from walking. From your mother walking with you when you were small, naming things, tasting things, showing you which plant by the stream is watercress and which one is fool's watercress, and what happens if you confuse them. What happens if you confuse them is bad. Your mother showed you the difference until you could pick it out from 10 feet away. That's how this knowledge works. Not written down, walked, tasted, demonstrated, corrected, passed from mother to daughter for longer than anyone can remember, for longer than records exist, for longer than writing itself was a thing that ordinary people did. The water is heating. You can see the first small bubbles forming on the bottom of the pot. The baby is awake properly now, making the small seeking sound that means she wants feeding. You pick her up. She smells of clean sleep and the faint sour sweetness of nursing infants, and settle by the fire on the low stool. While she feeds, you think. The thinking is important. People imagine that farmwife life is all physical, all movement and labour, and the labour is real. We'll get to the labour, but the thinking is constant, a kind of low background management that never stops, that runs underneath everything you do. What are the children's shoes like? Williams are letting in water. You need to find something to patch them with. What is Agnes coughing? The ordinary cough, or the cough that goes deep, that you watch carefully? Ordinary you've decided, but you're watching. What does the garden need right now? What is ready to harvest from the wild places? What does Thomas need that you're not giving him? And what are you going to do about the fact that you're exhausted all the way down to your bones and the world doesn't care? The fire snaps and pops. Outside, the first birds. You can hear them through the thatch. There's a robin that nests somewhere near the eave. You've watched him build every spring for 4 years now, which means you're older than his family, and he's been here longer than your youngest child. He starts first, always in the pre-dawn darkness, a thin, bright, almost aggressive sound. Then the others join. In the village a dog barks, then another. Someone's animals are stirring. You hear the muffled complaint of a cow somewhere. Close, Aldith the tanner's wife keeps her cow in a small byre attached to her cottage, the way you keep your 2 goats in the lean-to against your back wall. The sound of animals and the sound of houses are the same sound in this village. You know every animal's voice. You know the cow that Aldith keeps and the particular bellow it does when it hasn't been milked on time. You know the sound your goats make, both of them, and can tell from the sound what mood they're in before you even open the lean-to door. This is not charming rural knowledge. This is survival data. A goat that's off her feed might be sick. A sick goat that goes unnoticed becomes a dead goat, and a dead goat in March is a catastrophe. Goats give milk. Milk feeds children. Milk can be turned into cheese that keeps through the summer. A single goat represents months of nutrition for a family, and you know their voices the way you know your children's voices, because they are, functionally, your children's welfare. The baby is finished. You put her on your shoulder, rub her back, feel the small release of tension as she burps. Put her back in the cradle. Time to get properly started. This is the hard moment of every morning. The moment when you account honestly for the work the day holds. Not because it's overwhelming. You've learned not to let it be overwhelming because being overwhelmed doesn't milk the goats, but because you need the inventory. Goats, the morning milking first. Wood. The pile is getting low. You need to remind Thomas, though he already knows, though reminding him will probably be received with the patience of a man who also already knows everything that needs doing and is also exhausted. The garden. March means the early garden work is beginning. The beds need turning. The peas need to go in. You're already on the late side. And the onion sets you saved from last year's crop need to be planted before they lose their energy. Agnes's cough. She slept through the night, which is good. You'll watch her today. You have a preparation ready. Dried thyme in honey, which soothes the throat and has something in it that seems to discourage the sickness from deepening. You've given it to every child in the village at some point. You've given it to adults too, though they're sometimes embarrassed to ask. The neighbours. Old Marjorie in the cottage by the mill has been going wrong in her joints since midwinter. You've been visiting her twice a week, bringing things. Not because anyone asked you to or pays you to, because she's 70 and alone and someone has to. And in this village you're the person who does, the midwife. Though that's not quite what you are, or not only what you are, is a complicated title. You're not the oldest woman in the village. You're not even the most experienced. There's a woman 3 villages away who's been attending births for 40 years, and when things are very bad you send for her. But she's 3, miles away, and babies come when they come. In the last year you've been called twice in the night to a neighbour's house. Both times things went well. Both times you used what your mother showed you, and what her mother showed her, and what the village knowledge has accumulated over so many generations that nobody remembers when it started. You weren't trained. You weren't certified. You just knew what to do. The physicians at the university in Oxford, there is a university in Oxford, has been for over a century now, would find this scandalous. A woman with no formal training, no degree, no knowledge of humours or phlebotomy, or the signs of the zodiac's influence on health, attending births, prescribing remedies. The physicians at Oxford have a mortality rate at childbirth that, in the rare cases where they're actually involved, is frankly no better than yours. Often worse, because they do things that don't help. We'll get to that too. The goats first. You wrap your shawl, tight, wool, heavy, slightly scratchy, smelling of wood smoke and lanolin and the specific smell of yourself that you stopped noticing years ago, and go out through the back. March morning. The sky is that colour that isn't quite dark and isn't quite light, a deep blue-grey that sits heavy on the world. Your breath clouds white in front of your face. The ground under your feet is hard, but there's a softness at the edges of the frozen mud that says the frost is losing its grip. The lean-to is warm with goat. This is something people don't talk about, the warmth of animals in winter. Your goats generate heat the way all living things do, and in a lean-to that's reasonably well built, that heat builds up overnight into something almost comfortable. You step in and the temperature difference is immediate and profound. From the cold, grey March morning into this close, warm darkness that smells powerfully of hay and dung and goat. Bessie is waiting for you. She always is. She knows. The sound of your footsteps in a way that suggests she's been listening for them since before she was awake, which is probably close to true. She presses her head against your hand when you reach for her. You milk her first because she'll complain if you don't, and the second goat, you call her nothing for reasons that made sense when she was a kid and have stuck despite making no sense at all, is more patient. Milking is a physical practice. Your hands know it without your mind's involvement. The rhythm of it, the pull and release, the way you lean slightly forward, the way the milk sounds different as the bucket fills. Your hands are cold at first and then warm with the work. The goats chew their hay and breathe their hay-smelling breath, and the world is, for a few minutes, very simple. You think about Agnes's cough. You think about the grain stores. You think about Marjorie's hands, which shook yesterday in a way that worried you, and whether that's just the cold or something more. Nothing complains softly. You switch. The milk comes in straight lines into the bucket, making a sound that changes as the level rises, thin and high at first, then fuller and lower, like a note deepening. The sound of the morning milk. You've heard it so many times it's become a kind of music, the background score of early morning. By the time you're done, the sky has shifted to pale grey. The shapes of the world are arriving. Back inside, the children are waking. William first, because he always is. He sits up from the pallet with the immediate full consciousness of young children, looking around as if he needs to check that the world is still the same world he left. He sees you, relaxes. Is it time? Not quite. Lie still a bit more. He doesn't lie still, he never does. He creeps out from the covers carefully, trying not to wake Agnes, and comes to stand by the fire in his sleeping clothes, which are his everyday clothes because he doesn't have different ones. For sleeping, he smells of sleep and small boy. What is it today, he asks, by which he means, what is the main work of today? He's 6. He already understands that the day is organised around work, that there is always a main thing, that his participation is expected. Garden, you say, and gathering. His face changes slightly. He doesn't complain. He doesn't complain because you've never modelled complaining as a response to work. But you can read the small shift in his expression. That means he was hoping for something else. Can we go to the woods? The hedgerows first, then maybe the woods. That satisfies him. He goes to the corner and begins pulling on his outer shoes with the particular focused determination of a child doing something important. Agnes is awake now too, slower to surface, younger, quieter. She lies still for a moment watching her brother. You watch her breathe. Her chest rises and falls normally. The cough that worried you last night seems absent in this morning moment. Come on then, you say. Breakfast is not a big production. The grain stores being what they are, breakfast in March 1347 in your cottage is porridge made thin, with a little salt and a scrape of the pork fat for calories. You add some of the dried herbs to it, not for medicine this time, but for taste, because thin porridge needs something, and dried thyme and a crumble of dried sage make it taste like something that was chosen rather than just survived. Thomas is awake now, sitting up, watching you work the porridge with the heavy wooden spoon. He has the face of a man who is awake but not yet fully present. He'll be present in about 10 minutes after the porridge. He's 31. He looks 40. This is not unusual in 1347. He's been doing physical labour since he was old enough to walk, in the kind of England where peasant men age visibly in a way that people with better nutrition and less brutal work do not. His hands are extraordinary, enlarged and calloused and rough in ways that are almost geological, like the bark of an old tree. But they're also precise. He can repair a plough joint or reseat a scythe blade with the same hands that look like they could only break things. You love him in the way that becomes possible between people who have shared too much reality for romance to survive, but who have found something better, the knowledge that this person will be there. When Agnes was sick in February, when the younger baby came in November with the cord around her neck and you needed Thomas to be calm while you worked and he was calm, when the harvest was bad last year and the winter stretched long and the grain bin got lower and lower and you both lay awake in the dark saying nothing, and somehow that was enough. He eats his porridge. You eat yours standing, because there's already the next thing and the thing after that. After breakfast, while Thomas goes out to begin the field work and the children wrap up for the cold and follow you outside, you pause at your shelves. This is a daily habit. Not a ceremony, not exactly. More like a doctor checking his instruments, a brief inventory, a mental accounting of what you have and what you're running low on and what will need replenishing soon. The woundwort salve. Still good. Another month in it, probably. The dried chamomile, running low. The new season's flowers won't be ready until June. You have maybe 2 weeks of supply, which means you have to be careful with it. The dried elderberries. Enough. You were generous with the harvest last autumn because elderberries are so reliable, so useful. The berry tea for colds, but also the bark, which you dry and use differently, and the flowers when they come in summer, which have their own applications. Dried yarrow, good supply. Yarrow you gather in quantity because it's everywhere and useful for almost everything. Wounds, fever, heavy bleeding. The dried stalks even have a use you were shown once by an old woman in the next village who had knowledge you didn't entirely understand but which you've tested enough times to trust. A small sealed pot of something dark. This is the one you don't leave out. This is the preparation you made from black horehound and a small amount of something else. And you use it only for the very specific situation of a woman whose monthly bleeding is dangerously heavy and won't stop. You've used it twice. Both times it worked. You keep it at the back of the shelf where the children can't reach it and where you don't have to explain it to visitors. There are things you know that you don't share, not because they're secret exactly, but because the world is complicated, and women who know certain things about women's bodies have been called certain names, and you're careful. You're always careful. You've seen what happens to women who aren't careful, and you've made a private decision about the line between helping people and being visible in the wrong way. This is the calculation behind the knowledge that nobody includes in the history books. The monk copying Galen doesn't have to make this calculation. He has his library and his monastery and his Latin, and those things protect him. The knowledge he holds is called scholarship. The knowledge you hold is called something else, depending on who's doing the calling. The university-trained physicians of 14th century England have a theory about illness. The theory is called humoral medicine, and it comes from the ancient Greeks, from Hippocrates and Galen, filtered through centuries of Arabic scholarship, filtered through more centuries of European scholarship, written down and argued over and copied in monasteries all across the continent. The theory says that the human body is governed by 4 humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Each humour has qualities: hot, cold, wet, dry. And health is a matter of keeping them balanced. Illness is an imbalance. The cure is to restore the balance. In practice, this means that when you get sick, the physician wants to know your dominant humour, and then he wants to help you by removing some of it. If you have too much blood, you're bled. If you have excess phlegm, you're given something to purge. If the imbalance is connected to the stars, and everything is connected to the stars, then the timing of treatment must match the position of the moon. There are charts for this. Long, elaborate, illustrated charts showing which parts of the body are governed by which zodiac signs, and what must not be done during the ascendancy of certain planets. Surgeons consult these charts before operating. Physicians consult them before prescribing. Is any of this correct? It is not. There are no humours. Bloodletting a sick person removes the blood they need to fight the illness. Purging a person who is already depleted makes them weaker. Operating during the wrong moon phase or the right one makes no difference at all to whether the patient survives. The medieval physician, highly educated, expensively trained, speaking Latin, able to discourse brilliantly on ancient texts, is, in many cases, making his patients worse. Meanwhile, you're packing woundwort into cuts and avoiding the sepsis that kills people in hospitals. You don't know about bacteria. You don't know about infection. or the germ theory that won't exist for another 5 centuries, but you know, because your mother knew and her mother before her, that wounds need to be kept clean, that certain plants put on a wound seem to stop it from going bad, and that you should wash your hands before attending a birth. You wash your hands before attending a birth. You've always done this. It's just what you do. It's village knowledge, old knowledge, the accumulated observation of generations of women who noticed that clean hands meant better outcomes, even if they had no word for why. The physicians don't wash their hands. Their system doesn't tell them to. Their system talks about humours and celestial influences, and hand-washing isn't in the charts. More women die in childbirth attended by physicians than in childbirth attended by experienced farmwives and village midwives. This is 1347. Nobody has done the statistics. Nobody is doing the statistics. But the numbers are there, in the outcomes, in the village records, in the survival rates of women who had the right person in the room when the baby came. William is at your side now, dressed, impatient, watching you stare at your shelves. You're thinking, he says, with the mild accusation of children whose mothers think too slowly. I am. Can we go now? Get your sister's shawl, he goes. You take down a small bundle from the shelf, a bundle of dried rosemary mostly, and put it in the basket you use for gathering. Not because you need rosemary today, but because you keep it with you. The smell of rosemary has something in it that seems to clear your head. You don't need to be able to explain why. You just know that when your head is foggy from too little sleep and too much worry, holding dried rosemary to your nose for a moment helps. Hundreds of years later, someone will discover that rosemary contains compounds that have measurable effects on cognition. They will publish studies. It will be news. You just knew it helped, so you kept it close. Outside, the morning is fully arrived now. The sky has gone from grey to a thin, watery, pale blue. The light is cold but honest. The frost on the ground is melting at the edges, leaving the earth dark and damp in patches, still white and hard in the shadows. The village of Stoneham spreads out around you. You know it the way you know your own hands. 28 households, maybe 115 people if you count the children, which you do, because children count. The cottages are mostly the same as yours. Daub and wattle walls, thatched roofs, one main room, maybe a small, extra space for storage or sleeping. Some are in better condition than others. The blacksmith's house, near the centre, is the largest and most solid, because the blacksmith is important and people pay him appropriately. The old priest's house, Father Edmund, who is 62 and has been here since before anyone can remember, is next to the church, which is stone, the only stone building in the village, and which therefore seems to the villagers like something between a building and a fact. The Lord's Manor House is at the edge of the village up the slight rise. You can see it from most places in Stoneham, a larger timber structure, 2 stories, with glass in 2 of the windows. Glass is remarkable. Glass is a signifier of enormous wealth in a village where most windows are covered with oiled cloth or left open. You don't think about the manor house much. The Lord, Sir Geoffrey de Stoneham, who is 38 and mostly concerned with his own affairs and the politics of people several rungs above your world, makes his demands through the reeve who collects what's owed and communicates what's required. You pay your dues in labour on the Lord's strips and in a portion of what you produce. In return, you have your land, your cottage, your village, your protection, theoretical protection from the outside world. It's a transaction, not a comfortable one, always. but a transaction you understand. The path to the hedgerows runs along the edge of the field and then dips down toward the stream. William runs ahead. Agnes walks beside you, her small hand tucked into yours, the two of you moving at her pace, which is sensibly slower than her brother's. "Will you show me the ones to eat?" Agnes says. "I'll show you." "The same ones as before?" "Different ones today. The spring ones. They're different from the autumn ones." She considers this with the gravity of a 4-year-old being told that the world is more complicated than she thought. "Different names?" "Different names, different shapes. Some of the same families. I'll show you." This is how it works. This is exactly how it has always worked. Not a classroom, not a textbook. A walk, with a small hand in yours in the cold March morning pointing at things. This plant, this one, not this one. Feel the leaf. Feel how it's different. Smell it. That smell means this other smell means that. Agnes won't remember all of it today. She'll remember some of it. She'll ask questions about the part she doesn't understand. You'll walk this way again in a week, in a month, through the summer when the plants are different, through the autumn harvest of berries and roots, through all the seasons until the knowledge becomes part of how she walks through the world. In 20 years she'll know this hedgerow the way you know it, and she'll teach her children, and the knowledge will continue, unnamed, unwritten, passed through hands and words and walks in all weathers. The first thing you show her is hawthorn. The hawthorn hedge runs along the south edge of the field, a dense tangle of grey branches still mostly bare, but with the first swelling of buds. Not open yet. They won't open for another few weeks, but you can see the green beginning. The young leaves, you tell her, when they open, they're good to eat, sweet almost, and they give you strength in spring when you need it. What do they taste like? Like green, like the beginning of something. She looks at the buds with a focused attention that pleases you. "Not yet," she says, demonstrating that she understands the timing. "Not yet. Remember where this is." You move along the hedge. You're looking for the things that are ready now in this thin march, not waiting for spring's generosity, but making do with spring's first offering. There. You steer her toward a patch of ground near the base of the hedge, low and damp, where a cluster of plants sits with the bright particular green of things that have pushed through cold earth. "Do you know this one?" Agnes looks, studies. "It's pointed at the end. The leaves are pointed. And they're long. Long and pointed, and the edges are..." You run her small finger along the edge, carefully. Feel that? Scratchy. Nettle. But a young nettle, not the big summer ones. A young nettle doesn't sting much. You pick a small bunch with your bare hands quickly, while the tiny hairs haven't fully formed. Put them in the basket. "It stings a bit." "Yes, it stings a bit. You'll learn the speed of it." A pause. "Your grandmother could pick nettles faster than anyone I've ever seen. She said it was all in the angle." Agnes files this away. You see her file it. You work along the hedgerow for an hour, gathering. Nettles. A good amount. They'll go into the pot today, boiled with a little of the dried onion and whatever fat you have. Nettle soup is not exciting. Nettle soup is, if you let it be, something genuinely good, thick and green and warming, and your children will eat it without complaint because they've grown up knowing that nettle soup in March is what keeps them going. Chickweed. Low. Sprawling. Everywhere along the base of the hedge, its tiny white flowers like stars at the end of every stem. Agnes picks it by the handful. Good. Chickweed can go in the soup or be eaten raw, mild and slightly slimy, full of things the body needs. ground ivy, which grows in spreading mats in the shade. This one goes in a separate bundle, not for eating. Ground ivy is useful for the lungs, for the cough that sits deep in the chest. You've been gathering it all winter whenever you find it. Dandelion greens, already up in the more sheltered spots, dark green and bitter, the true first taste of spring. You show Agnes which leaves are the right size for eating, not the ones that have been up too long and are too bitter, but the young ones, the newly unfurled ones, which are bitter in a useful way, the way that wakes your liver up after a winter of heavy preserved foods. You don't use the word liver in that way. You don't have the physiology. You have the knowledge that spring greens that taste bitter make you feel better in March than you did in February, and that's enough. William is back now, having explored the section of hedgerow where the blackbirds nest and reported nothing of immediate interest. He comes to look at the basket. Nettles again, he says, and chickweed and dandelion. He looks at this without enthusiasm. Is there honey? Maybe. Help me look for something. You take him to the damp section near the stream, where the alders grow and the ground stays soft. He follows you into this shadowed place where the cold is sharper and the ice hasn't fully left the mud. What are we looking for? Something that smells before you see it. He lifts his head, sniffs. His face changes. That's, he considers, onions? Not quite. Close. Look low. He drops to a crouch immediately, scanning the base of the alders, the dark earth between the roots. There. He's found it before you fully expected him to. He's quick, your son. Quick and careful, which is the best combination. The ramsons are just emerging. Broad, lance-shaped leaves, intense glossy green against the dark soil, the smell of wild garlic rising sharp and clean and unmistakable. You crouch beside him. Wild garlic. Ramsons. Better than planted garlic for some things. The leaf can go in the pot today. The flower in summer's good raw. The bulb you can use the same as the garlic in the garden. You pick a leaf. Crush it slightly between your fingers. Hold it out. Smell! William smells. His whole face opens with it. That's what strong green smells do to people. They open the face, wake something up. We're taking some? All I can carry without damaging the root. We need to leave the root. So it comes back. So it comes back every year. He helps you pick, careful, the way you showed him. Not pulling from the base, not disturbing the underground bulb, just taking the leaves you need and leaving the plant to live and return. This, too, is knowledge. The management of wild places. The understanding that if you take everything today, there's nothing tomorrow. That the hedgerow and the wood margin and the stream bank are not inexhaustible and not owned and not farmed, but they are in a real sense tended, watched, given back to. Nobody in the village holds a meeting about this. Nobody has a policy. But everyone who uses these places knows the informal rules, observe them from their parents, will pass them to their children. Take what you need. Leave what you find. Don't strip a patch bare. The Ramsons will be here next March, and the March after, and the March decades from now, because the people who harvested them understood this basic arithmetic. On the way back through the village, you stop at the mill. Not for the mill itself. The mill is Thomas's concern. The grinding of grain is a separate world of machinery and obligation, and the miller's personality, which is difficult. You stop for the cottage beside it. You knock. The door opens almost immediately, which means Marjorie has been up for a while, which means she didn't sleep well, which confirms what you suspected yesterday. She's a small woman, diminished by age into something almost architectural, all the unnecessary parts worn away, leaving just the essential structure. Her face is so mapped by lines that you can read the 70 years in it like rings in wood. Her hands, which shook yesterday, shake now as she opens the door, and you file this away. "Come in then," she says, as if you've interrupted something. You go in. Her cottage is smaller than yours and smells more strongly of age and certain herbs. She has her own relationship with plants, Marjorie does, accumulated over 7 decades in this village, and the bundles hanging from her beams are different from yours in ways that tell you she has knowledge you don't. This is important to understand. You don't have all the knowledge. Nobody has all the knowledge. The knowledge is distributed across the village, across the region, across the generations, each person holding their piece of it, sharing it laterally and vertically, creating a network of knowing that no individual contains. You're 26. You know what your mother taught you and what you've learned since. Marjorie is 70 and has been accumulating knowledge for longer than your mother has been alive. You come to her the way a student comes to a teacher, even though neither of you would use those words. "How are the hands?" you ask. She holds them out. The tremor is clearly visible in the morning light from the open door. "Worse," she says, not complaining, reporting. You take her hands in yours. They're cold and dry and the skin is loose over the joints, the knuckles enlarged from decades of the same work that has enlarged yours, but much further. You press gently at the joints. She doesn't flinch. Pain, ache, not sharp, just ache. And the shaking, does it stop when you hold something, or does it stay? She reaches for the cup on the table, picks it up. The shaking continues slightly, but lessens with the weight in her hand. Lessens, you nod. This tells you something, not the same as the shaking that means the brain is going wrong. Something in the joints, in the hands themselves, inflammation that the cold is worsening. "I'll bring you something today, the preparation with the meadowsweet. Have you still got some?" "Used the last of mine in February." "I have enough. I'll bring it with the willow bark." You're already thinking about proportions. The meadowsweet and willow bark preparation that you know reduces the shaking and the ache. Something in both plants that works on inflammation, that eases the complaint in aging joints. You don't know the word salicylate, but you know what works. I've told you. Before, Marjorie says, watching you with her sharp old eyes, you ought to go to the priory. She says this occasionally. It's an argument she returns to. To do what? To learn. To write things down. They have Galen and bloodletting, you say. Marjorie makes the sound she makes when she disagrees but knows you have a point. They have more than that. Brother Thomas, the infirmary, the young one, he's interested in plants. He's been asking questions. This is news. You look at her. Asking questions of who? She meets your eyes. Of me, last month. He came with questions about the preparation for the chest cough. He'd heard I had something for it. From who? A shrug. People talk. People do talk. You've been aware that your reputation, the farmwife who has remedies, who knows which plants are which, who can be called at a difficult birth, has been spreading in ways that make you cautious. What did you tell him? The truth. That it comes from elder and time and a good dose of sense. A pause. He was respectful. He might be. The priory itself, I know. She knows. In the village of Stoneham, everyone knows what happened to the woman in the village of Harbridge 2 years ago. You don't name the thing. You don't have to. Marjorie knows. But he seemed like a man trying to learn, she says more quietly, not like a man looking for reasons. You think about this, the basket in your hands, the nettles and the chickweed and the ramsons and the ground ivy. I'll think about it, you say. Here is what the priory looks like from the path that climbs the hill to the east of the village. It appears first as a tower, just the tower, rising above the tree line, stone against the pale sky. Pale limestone, quarried from somewhere north of here, fitted by craftsmen who came from outside the county and left without teaching what they knew. The tower is not enormous, it's not a cathedral, not even close, but in a landscape of thatched roofs and timber walls, stone rising into the sky has a weight of permanence that hits something very old in you. The Priory of St. Cuthbert's is 50 years old, not ancient. Your great-grandmother was alive when the foundation stone was laid. It houses 23 monks, an abbot who is more interested in politics than prayer, and a small library that contains 37 books, which is an extraordinary collection for 1347 in rural Wiltshire. It also contains, in the north wing, a physic garden. You've seen this garden twice. Once when you came to deliver something to the cook's door, and once when a monk was ill, and the prior's man came to ask if you had a certain preparation, which told you more about the priory's medical supplies than they probably intended. The physic garden has lavender and hyssop and feverfew and rue, all things you know. It also has plants you don't see in the hedgerows, exotic things, grown from seeds brought from far away, from the Holy Land, from Spain, from the great monasteries of France. Plants whose names you don't know and whose properties you've only partially guessed from watching what the monks do with them. You want that knowledge. You've always wanted it. The path is steep enough that you feel it in your thighs. Climbing with the basket, Agnes's hand released because the path is narrow and she can manage it herself. William is already at the top, having run up the easy way that children run up things, which is to say, without thinking about it. The priory gate is wood, iron-banded, set into a stone archway, a bell pull on one side. You've never rung it before, you ring it now. The young monk who opens the gate is not Brother Thomas. He is maybe 17, with the look of someone who was placed in the monastery by his family and has not yet decided whether he agrees with this decision. He looks at you, a farm wife with a basket of plants and 2 children at her heels, with an expression that is confused rather than hostile. I came to speak with Brother Thomas, you say. The infirmera. My name is Joan Hayward, of Stoneham village. The young monk blinks. Brother Thomas is in the garden, he says. Would you tell him Joan Hayward is here? He'll know the name. You're not entirely sure of this. But Marjorie said he was asking questions, and if he was asking questions of Marjorie, he knows Marjorie, and Marjorie would have mentioned you. About the remedies. The young monk disappears. You wait in the archway with your children. Agnes has found something on the stone doorpost that interests her. A small carved face near the base, crude and old-looking, possibly pre-Norman. William is looking up at the tower with the expression of someone calculating whether climbing it will be possible. Don't, you say, without looking at him. I wasn't. Don't. Footsteps on stone. You straighten. Brother Thomas is, you realise, about your age. You were expecting older somehow. Marjorie spoke of him with a respect she tends to reserve for age. But he's young, maybe 30, with the indoor pallor of a man who lives mostly inside and the hands of someone who works in a garden. His hands are dirty, in fact. He's come directly from the physic garden without cleaning them. He notices this himself and wipes them on his habit with a gesture of minor embarrassment. Mistress Hayward. He looks at you with a directness that is not quite rude, but is not quite polite. The look of someone too interested in the subject to bother much with social performance. I've heard of your work. Marjorie said you've been asking questions. Yes. No hesitation. About the elder preparation and other things. He looks at the basket. Are those ramsons? And nettles and ground ivy for the lungs. He steps forward and looks at the basket without touching it, with the focused attention of someone who genuinely wants to know what he's seeing. The ground ivy, you use it for the deep cough, the one that sits in the chest for weeks and won't move, the one where the person breathes wrongly, short and high. You demonstrate with your own breath, the shallow breath of the bad chest cough. The ground ivy infusion, drunk warm, helps move it. I've seen something similar in the texts. Hederula in some, it's referred to variously. He stops. I'm sorry. You don't read. This is stated without contempt. He's simply noting a fact. I don't, you say. Does it matter? He looks at you. Something shifts in his expression. I'm beginning to think it matters less than I was taught to think it does. You stand in the archway of the priory for an hour. You weren't invited in. This is noticed and not addressed. The rules of what a farmwife can and cannot do within monastery walls are complicated, and Brother Thomas navigates the complication by holding the conversation at the gate, which is neither inside nor outside, a location without a clear rule for it. He has questions, real questions, the kind asked by someone trying to understand rather than someone looking for confirmation of what they already believe. How long does the ground ivy infusion need to steep? Until the water has colour, you tell him, until it smells right. What temperature does the water need to be? Hot but not boiling. Boiling takes something out of delicate plants, something you can't see but can taste. How do you know when the preparation is strong enough? You try to find words for the last one. You know by smell and by taste, if the plant is safe to taste. There's a point where it crosses from weak to right. It's like, you think, it's like the difference in bread dough when it's ready. You don't measure it. You feel it. He writes nothing down. He has no paper with him. But his expression is the expression of someone storing things. You have your own questions. You ask them, what plants does the physic garden have that you don't know? He describes 3. 2 are versions of things you know by different names. The third, a plant brought from the Levant, small and silver-leafed, with properties he describes cautiously, is new to you. He describes what it does. You ask how. He explains in the humoral language, which is wrong. But underneath the wrong explanation there's something that matches what you've observed about similar local plants, and you translate it internally. What does he think about the bloodletting that the physicians do? A pause here, a long pause. He's weighing what he can say to a farmwife at a monastery gate. There are texts that question the extent of it, he says finally. Older texts, and my own observation. He stops. I shouldn't say. I won't repeat it. Another pause. Then, my observation, in the infirmary here, is that brothers who are bled when very ill do not do better than those who are not. Sometimes they do worse. He looks at you steadily. This is not the official position. No, you say. I know. William has found a lizard on the warm south-facing wall. Agnes is sitting on the step, carefully examining a dandelion she's pulled from the base of the wall, looking at it the way you showed her to look at plants. systematically from root to tip, trying to see all of it. The morning has gone on. The conversation at the Priory gate has lasted longer than you intended, but there's a quality to it that feels too valuable to cut short. The woman in Harbridge, you say finally. Brother Thomas goes still. I know that the prior... I won't be asking for protection, you say. I'm not asking for that. I'm asking... You stop finding the words. I'm asking whether what you're doing here, the questions you're asking, is safe for someone like me. He understands exactly what you mean. He looks at you for a long moment. I can't promise you anything, he says. I'd be lying if I said it was without risk. The world is... He makes a small gesture. Complicated. What I can tell you is that I'm not looking for reasons. I'm trying to understand why certain things work. A pause. And I believe you understand things I don't. And that seems more important right now than who's allowed to know what. It's not a promise of safety. It's not even much of a reassurance. But it's honest. And in 1347, honesty from someone with more institutional power than you will ever have is not nothing. Come back, he says, next week if you can. Bring what you're willing to bring. I'll show you the silver-leafed plant. You walk back down the hill with your children. Agnes is asking about the lizard, which William describes at great length in the language of someone who has just seen the best lizard in the world. The village spreads below you in the pale midday light. From up here, you can see all of it. The cottages with their threads of smoke. The strips of the open field system, not one big field, but many, divided into strips, each family farming their allocated strips. The whole pattern visible from this height as a kind of complicated quilt. The dark line of the stream, the priory tower behind you, its shadow reaching down the hillside, and beyond the village the land continuing, the bigger farms, the manor, the road that leads to the market town 8 miles away, and beyond that roads that go to places you have never been. London, which is a word and a story, not a place you've touched. France, which is a word for where the wars happen. The sea, which you've never seen, but which you know is somewhere to the south, because the monks have told you, and because sometimes, in autumn, the wind comes from that direction and smells like something different. Your world is, in the most literal sense, this village and the few miles around it. You know this world completely. You know it in a way that no one who doesn't live in it can know it. The way you know a face you've looked at every day for years, every variation. In it, every change, every sign of weather or health or approaching problem. You know this hillside. You know which side of these hedgerows the different plants prefer. You know which way the wind comes in autumn, which makes a difference to which direction the fruit trees need protecting. You know the quality of the soil in the low field near the stream versus the quality on the hill. The low field heavier and richer, but flooding sometimes in late winter. The hill soil thinner and draining fast but warming up earlier in spring, which makes a difference to what you plant. This is knowledge too. It's not the knowledge that ends up in books. It's not the knowledge that gets called knowledge by people who write books. But it is, in the most practical sense imaginable, the knowledge that keeps people alive. You're gutting the nettle soup when the knock comes. Not a knock exactly. A fist. The difference matters. A knock is someone who has time to be polite. A fist means there is no... Time to be polite means someone has run the distance between their house and yours and is now standing outside your door with urgency in their whole body. You're at the pot, stirring when you hear it. The ramsons are already in. You added them 10 minutes ago, and the smell that fills the cottage is extraordinary. Green and sharp and alive, the smell of everything that is not winter. The nettle and chickweed broth has gone the deep olive colour that means it's ready. You've added the last of the dried onion and a scrape of fat, and the whole thing smells improbably like something good. Thomas looks up from his seat by the fire where he's repairing a leather strap. You're already at the door. Outside, John Blackwater from the far end of the village. He's 17, the older son of a farming family, and he's been running. His face is red from cold and effort and something else. Fear, which in a 17-year-old boy presenting at your door in the late afternoon of a March day means one of two things. My mother, he says. Not his mother's health in general, not an ambiguous errand. The way he says it, just those two words, my mother, with that specific quality of compressed panic, tells you everything you need to know about why he's here. The baby's coming? It's been coming since this morning. Since before... He swallows. She said not to come for you until... How long between the pains now? He blinks at you. He doesn't know. Young men in 1347 don't attend births, don't witness births, are kept away from births, in the same way they're kept away from other things that happen exclusively to women's bodies in rooms that aren't their business. He has no language for what you just asked. Is she making a lot of noise, you say? Yes. More noise than she was an hour ago, he thinks, nods. Right, go ahead, I'm coming. He takes off at a run. You're back inside in 2 steps. Thomas has already stood up. Alice Blackwater, you say. The baby's been coming since morning, Thomas nods. He knows what this means. He's watched you do this before. You're at the shelves. Your hands know what to take. They move with the practiced speed of someone who has rehearsed this mentally, because you do rehearse it. Not formally, not deliberately, but the knowledge sits at the front of your mind in a way that makes the hands fast when speed matters. The clean cloths folded, which you keep specifically for this. You take them all. The small knife, clean, kept separate, kept sharp, for the cord, the preparation for bleeding. This is the one in the dark pot at the back, not the complicated one, not the black horehound preparation for something more specific. This is the preparation for the simple, terrifying possibility of a birth that doesn't want to stop bleeding afterward. Dried yarrow and shepherd's purse, and one other ingredient that your mother gave you dried from her own stores when you first started attending births, that she got from her mother, and which you've always called by the name you were given for it, even though it has a dozen names depending on which village you're in. The thyme and honey preparation for afterward. For the mother's throat, raw from hours of effort, the bundle of dried lavender. This sounds like luxury. It is not luxury. Lavender, burning in a closed room, does something to the air. You've observed this over years of attending births in rooms where women have been in labour for many hours, where the air has become something close and threatening. The lavender changes it. You don't know how. You know it helps. The oil, olive oil, which is expensive, which you use sparingly. For your hands, for the baby, if the baby needs help. For the work of attending a body that is doing the most effortful thing a human body can do. You wrap all of it in the clean cloth, roll it, put it in the basket. Agnes, William, you say, you'll stay with your father, eat the soup, go to bed when he says. Agnes looks up at you with the understanding that some children have, the understanding that something serious is happening and her job is not to add to it. Is it the baby at the Blackwaters? She says. Yes. She nods, holds out her arms for the baby sister, who needs to be transferred from your hip. You pass her across. She takes her without fuss, already understanding this role, already at 4 years old settling into the shape of the older child who handles things while the mother is needed elsewhere. William is watching you. Will it be all right? He says. This is the question you won't answer dishonestly but can't answer completely. I'm going to help, you say. That's what I do. Stay here with your father. Thomas is at your shoulder. He presses something into your hand. A small piece of the hard cheese which he's cut from the remaining wheel. For later, he says, in case you're there past midnight. You look at him, this man with his extraordinary hands and his exhausted face and his simple, accurate knowledge of what you need. I'll try not to be, you say. You'll be as long as it takes, he says. Come home safe. The path to the Blackwaters' cottage takes you across the centre of the village, past the church, past the smithy, where the fire's been banked for the evening, and the smell of hot metal still hangs in the cool air. The sun is going now. The sky in the west is that particular March sunset colour. Not warm, not orange, but a kind of pale, cold gold that will be dark in half an hour. Your feet know the path without your eyes' help. You're thinking. This is what happens on the walk to a difficult birth. Your mind runs through what you know, what you've observed in the births you've attended, what your mother taught you, what Marjorie told you the one time she spoke about the birth she'd attended in her own active years. You build a picture in your mind of the possibilities, not because you know what you'll find, because you want to have already thought through the options before you're in the room and there's no time. First baby, no. Alice Blackwater has 2 living children. She knows her body's work and her body knows its work. This is not the uncertainty of a first labour, but been going since morning. Morning to evening is long. Long can mean many things, some of them worrying and some of them simply the ordinary stubbornness of babies who haven't read any information about how long they're supposed to take. What you're hoping, the baby is simply taking its time and everything is in the right position, and you arrive to find the hard work nearly done, and mostly what's needed is a pair of calm hands and a familiar face. What you're not hoping, the baby is turned. A baby that faces the wrong way, that comes face up instead of face down, or that comes sideways, or that comes bottom first, is a different situation entirely. A baby that comes wrong is the situation that, in this century, in this village, with no surgeon anywhere near and no physician who would come to a farmwife's labour, is the situation where your knowledge is all that stands between Alice Blackwater and the outcome that nobody says out loud. You walk faster. The Blackwater cottage is lit from inside. You can see the glow of firelight around the edges of the door and through the one small window. There's noise, not screaming, which would concern you more. There's a low rhythmic sound, almost a groan, almost a moan, the sound a woman makes when labour has been going a long time, and the sound has worn down from its earlier peaks to something more sustained and exhausted. John Blackwater is standing outside his own door. This is the convention. Men outside, women inside. He looks at you with the expression that is purely relieved gratitude, the expression of someone who has been waiting for the specific person who knows what to do. How long exactly, you ask? She woke in the night, he says, before cock crow, said it felt different from the others. That's 12 hours at least, possibly 15. Has the water broken? A blank look. Has there been a flood of water at some point? Confusion, then recognition. In the morning? Early? Good. Water breaking is good. Water breaking and then no baby for many hours is less good, but manageable. Anyone with her now? My aunt, she came at midday. Good. Someone with her. Go to the smithy, you say. Tell Robert I need his fire. I need hot water, more than you have inside, and I need it fast. Can you do that? He's already moving. You go inside. The room hits you like a wave. Heat first. The fire has been kept high, which is right. A labouring woman needs warmth, and the March cold outside makes warmth something that has to be actively maintained. The heat is physical, pressing. Then smell. Labour has its own smell. Not bad exactly, but strong. Bodies working at their absolute limit produce a particular smell that is part sweat and part something more fundamental. Something that belongs to the deepest animal register of human experience. Tallow candles burning on every surface someone could find. The windowsill, the mantel shelf, the edge of the table pushed to the wall. The light is golden and jumping with every breath of draught from the door behind you. Alice Blackwater is on her knees on the floor. This is the first good sign. She's moved herself onto the floor instinctively from the bed. Labouring women often do this, move toward the positions that actually help, which is another thing the physicians don't understand and the university training doesn't prepare for, because the physicians aren't in these rooms. They theorize about birth from outside the rooms where birth happens. The women are inside. Alice's aunt, a broad, grey-haired woman named Edith, who you know slightly, looks up at you with something close to relief. She's been like this since the 3rd hour, Edith says. I've tried to get her up, but she won't. She's right to be down, you say, setting the basket on the table. Don't try to get her up. Alice. Alice Blackwater looks at you. She's 32. She's been labouring for 12 or 15 hours. She looks like what she is. A person who has been doing the hardest physical work imaginable for an entire day, who is exhausted in ways that make sleep seem like a different world, who is also completely focused in the animal way of a body that has narrowed its entire concern to one single thing. Joan, she says. Her voice is rough. Her hair is wet with effort. Her hands on the floor in front of her are gripping the rushes. I'm here. You crouch in front of her. Look at me. How are you feeling the pains? Low, she says. Very low. And... A pause. Her face changing as another pain comes and you watch her go through it. Note the rhythm and the length. Watch her come back out the other side. And wrong. Wrong how? She puts her hand on her lower back. Here. The pressure is here. You nod. You keep your face completely calm, back labour. The baby is facing up, spine against her spine, instead of the preferred face-down position. This is why it's been so long. The baby's head is pressing in the wrong direction, against the wrong structure. Every contraction is working against the baby's position instead of with it. This is not, on its own, a disaster. Babies born in the back position are born every day. They take longer. They hurt more. The particular deep bone pain of back labour is different from the ordinary labour pain. More grinding, more relentless. But they're born. What you need to do is help the baby turn. Edith, you say. Your voice is completely measured. This is a skill you learned not from any teacher, but from the first birth you attended where something went wrong, where you discovered that the room takes its temperature from the person in charge, and if the person in charge panics, the room panics, and a panicking labouring woman has a harder time than a labouring woman in a room that feels controlled. Can you get me the oil from my basket? The small bottle? Edith gets it. Alice, I'm going to ask you to move, not far. I want you on your hands and knees completely. Hands flat on the floor, knees wider than your hips. Can you do that? Alice does it without argument. This is the other thing about labouring women that no one who hasn't attended births understands. They are, in the midst of their extremity, extraordinarily cooperative with specific instructions. The chaos of labour is a chaos of the body, not the mind. The mind is often very clear, very focused. Good. Now, when the next pain comes, I want you to drop your chest. Your chest drops. Your hips stay up, like a cat stretching. Why? To give the baby room to turn. Alice looks at you over her shoulder. Her face is extraordinary, exhausted and trusting and completely present. You're sure? I'm sure of nothing in this world, you say, but this is the right thing to try. A small sound that might be a laugh. Then the pain comes. She drops her chest. You have your hands on her lower back, both hands, pressing with the heel of your palm against the place that hurts, applying a firm, steady pressure that you know, not from books, from years of doing this. Provide some relief against the grinding pressure of back labour. Edith watches. You show her where your hands are. Can you hold this, you say? This pressure, while I... Edith puts her hands where yours were. You move around, watch, assess. The next pain, and the one after, and the one after that. John comes back. Hot water, carried in a bucket, steam rising. You take it without ceremony, set it by the fire, put in the clean cloths to warm them. You wash your hands, carefully, thoroughly. The water is hot enough to be uncomfortable, and you use it anyway, working the soap, a rough cake of lye soap you carry for exactly this purpose, over every part of your hands, between every finger, the way you were shown to do, and the way you do every single time without exception. The monk copying Galen does not wash his hands. The physician who graduated from the university in Oxford and who charges 10 times what you charge, and who knows, Latin and Avicenna, does not wash his hands. You wash your hands. The baby takes another 3 hours. In that 3 hours, you move Alice through 4 different positions. Hands and knees, side lying, left side, the left side specifically because you found this helps. Briefly upright, leaning against Edith, swaying. The swaying matters, the movement matters. The body in motion giving the baby the opportunity to shift. Back to hands and knees when the pains come strongest. You work with your hands. The pressing on the lower back sustained through each pain, which Alice now reaches for automatically. She grabs your wrist when the next pain begins, pulls your hand to where it needs to be, and you press steady and hard for the full length of the contraction. You talk steadily, not reassurance exactly, not the meaningless, everything will be fine that people sometimes offer to labouring women, which labouring women can see through immediately and which provides nothing. You talk through what's happening. The baby is turning, you tell her. I can feel it. The pressure is moving forward. Feel that? That's different from before. Is it? Her voice very thin. Yes, that's good. That's what we want. Whether you feel this exactly, whether the pressure is measurably different, is a question of degrees. What you're doing, partly, is helping her to feel what is true, because the turn is happening gradually over the course of hours, and one of the things you know from years of attending births is that a woman who knows what's happening can work with it better than a woman who doesn't. Information is a tool. Understanding your own body's work is a tool. This is radically different from the medical philosophy of the time, which holds that the patient's understanding is largely irrelevant, that what matters is the practitioner's knowledge and the practitioner's interventions, and that the patient is a vessel for the physician's work rather than a participant in their own recovery. You don't think about this philosophically. You just talk to Alice. 'cause it helps. John Blackwater brings more hot water twice. Edith falls asleep briefly against the wall, wakes with a start, immediately helpful again. The fire is kept up. You eat the piece of cheese Thomas gave you, standing by the door in the 3 minutes when Alice is resting between bouts of intensity. The cheese is hard and good, and you eat it in 4 bites without tasting it. Then the pace changes. You've been here long enough to know it without Alice saying anything. The pace of everything changes in the last stage. The frequency, the depth, the quality of the effort. Alice's breathing shifts. All right, you say. We're close. Edith, behind her. Support her back. You move to where you need to be. This is where the oil matters. The warm oil on your hands, and the care you take, and the knowledge, practical, physical, intimate knowledge, of how to help a baby's passage while protecting the mother's body, which is trying to do something extraordinary and needs help doing it without damage. The physician would not be in this position. The physician would not have these hands or this knowledge. The physician would be advising from a theoretical position that has very little to do with the warm, specific, physical reality of what is actually happening in this room. Your hands know what to do. The baby comes, a girl. She comes into your hands at the end of a long, difficult day in March 1347, slippery and furious, already making the sound that is one of the best sounds in the world, the sound that means alive, breathing here. Alice makes a sound that is relief and exhaustion, and something past both of those, something that has no other name than the sound of it. You clean the baby's face first, clear the mouth. She's already crying, which is the correct response to being born. Rage and confusion, and the demand to be acknowledged. You wrap her in the warmed cloth, put her on Alice's chest. Then you stay. Because the birth of the baby is not the end of what you're here for. This is another thing that separates your knowledge from the theoretical. The physicians, when they do attend births, which is rare, which is a different story about who gets what medical attention in 1347, consider their work done at the birth. The baby is out. The job is complete. You know that the next hour is when women die. You stay. You watch. You have the yarrow preparation ready. You track what's happening with the absolute attention of someone who knows exactly what the wrong sign looks like and what to do if it appears. What appears tonight is everything right. The bleeding that is normal, the timing that is normal. Alice, exhausted and radiant and already looking at her daughter with a particular expression that means she has reorganized her world around this new person, the way every parent does and has always done and will always do. She's good, Alice says. She's perfect. You stay another hour. Then you wash your hands again, pack your basket, tell Edith to keep Alice warm and make sure she eats something. Anything, whatever she'll take, in the next few hours. Tell her to send for you immediately if the bleeding changes or if Alice develops a fever. You say goodbye to Alice, who's already half asleep with the baby on her chest. You go outside. John Blackwater is still there. He's been sitting on a log outside the cottage door for 3 hours in the March cold, and he stands up the moment you appear. Both. He can't finish the question. Both fine, you say. A girl, your mother, is well. Let her sleep. He makes a sound that is not a word. You don't wait for more. It's past midnight. The village is dark and the stars are hard and cold and very clear above the thatched roofs, and your feet know the path home and your whole body knows how tired it is. 3 days after the Blackwater birth, the Reeves man comes to your door. The Reeve is the Lord's local administrator, the man who manages the village's obligations upward. The Reeves man is a boy of about 14, who runs errands on a pony that is slightly too large for him, and has the permanent expression of someone who is not sure what they'll find at the next door. Mistress Hayward, Sir Geoffrey's man at the manor, asks that you go to the manor house. The steward has a fever. You look at the boy. The boy looks at you. Has a physician been called? He's there, the boy says. He came this morning from Marlborough. Then why? The physician asked for you, the boy says. This clearly surprises him. It surprises you too. The manor house up close is different from the manor house as a shape against the sky. The smell hits you at the gate. Money and damp timber and the particular combination of beeswax and tallow that marks a house, wealthy enough to burn beeswax candles in the good rooms and tallow everywhere else. There's a dog the size of a small horse that looks at you from the gate with the assessment of a dog that has met many people and is not impressed. A servant shows you in. Inside, the second floor, up a timber staircase into a corridor where the smell changes to something more specific. Sick room smell, the particular combination of sweat and medicaments, and the breathed-out air of someone who has been in a closed room for too long with an illness. The steward is a man of about 50, in the bed, and he looks like a man who's been fighting something for several days. His face is the colour of old linen. The sweat has left salt traces on his skin. He breathes in the careful way of someone whose chest is involved. The physician is standing at the bedside. He is, you observe, younger than you expected, maybe 35, and he has the clothes of a man who comes from a family with money, good wool, silver buttons. He holds himself with a specific posture of someone whose education is his most important attribute, who carries it in his spine. He looks at you with an expression that is complicated, not hostile, not dismissive, something between those, with a layer of what might be actual curiosity underneath. You're the Hayward woman. I'm Joan Hayward. The phrasing matters. You've learned to correct this particular construction quietly, without making a confrontation of it. Yes. I've heard you use preparations for lung illness, he says this carefully, not as an accusation, as a question with a statement's grammar. I use what works, you say, the Elder and Time compound. Among others. He's quiet for a moment, looks at the steward, who has his eyes open and is watching this exchange with the exhausted interest of a sick man who doesn't have the energy to care about politics. I've administered white hellebore, the physician says, for the balance of humours. You know what white hellebore does. Your knowledge and his knowledge converge on this plant, though from different directions. His texts tell him it's an emetic, a purgative, appropriate for certain imbalances. Your knowledge, accumulated and practical, tells you that white hellebore in a man already weakened by chest fever is, you think of a word for it, unkind. That the purging it induces takes something from an already depleted body. And, you say, he's worse than yesterday. The physician says this flatly, without defensiveness actually, which surprises you. He's been worse since the hellebore. He's been worse since... A pause. Since I arrived. You look at the physician. He looks at you. This is a remarkable moment. University-trained physician in 1347, in the bedroom of a manor house, saying to a farmwife that his patient has gotten worse since his treatment began. It would not be remarkable as a statement of fact. It's often true. It is remarkable as something he's saying out loud to you. You sent for me, you say. I asked about local women with knowledge of lung fevers. The Reeves man mentioned your name. He looks at the steward. I don't want him to die. No. A silence that has quality to it. Two people with different knowledge and different status and different language for what they know, looking at a sick man together. What would you do? The physician says. What you do is this. You ask him to open the window, just slightly, just enough for some air to move. The physician watches this with an expression of contained skepticism. The standard medicine of 1347 is not interested in fresh air. It is interested in protecting the patient from harmful night airs, but he does it. You make the elder preparation. The hot water John brought is still in its bucket, barely warm now. You ask for it to be heated again. The servant looks at the physician. The physician nods. While the water heats, you look at the steward. Does the cough bring anything up, you ask. He looks at you, then at the physician. The physician nods, giving permission or simply accepting that you're asking. Yellow, the steward says. Thick, yellow. Since when? 2 days. You put this together with his colour and his breathing and the salt traces on his skin. The infection has gone deep, not just the throat and the chest, deeper. The lungs themselves, all very close. What does he eat, you ask? He has no appetite, the physician says. I know, but what have you given him? Water, some broth. Broth from what? The physician looks slightly uncertain. I didn't specify. You turn to the servant. Get me broth from whatever's on the fire in the kitchen. Get me fresh bread if there's any, and honey. And tell the cook I want garlic if she has it, crushed raw. The servant goes. The physician says carefully, You're going to feed him. He needs energy to fight this, you say. He's starving while his body tries to do the hardest thing it knows how to do. The texts advise light diet in fever. The texts were written by people who watched patients die of fevers, you say. Not unkindly, just exactly. And decided the diet was right. He says nothing to this. The water comes. You make the elder preparation first. Elderberry, dried thyme, a small amount of the ground ivy for the deep chest element, steeped long enough in the hot water that the liquid goes the right colour, the right smell. Not boiling water. Hot. You give it to the steward in small amounts, slowly watching him drink it. The garlic, you say, when the raw crushed garlic arrives. Put a small amount in the broth. He won't, the servant starts. In the broth. He won't taste it separately. The physician watches all of this with the focused attention of Brother Thomas at the priory gate. The attention of someone who is actually trying to understand, not trying to find fault. The elder, he says, what do you know about it? What does your knowledge say it does? You consider how to answer. It helps the body fight the sickness, you say. The deep berry especially. My mother said it, and her mother said it, and I've seen it enough times to know they were right. And the mechanisms? The humoral. I don't know the mechanisms, you say. I know it works. He's quiet. I was taught, he says slowly. That empirical observation without theoretical framework is mere trial and error. That the value of scholarship is the theoretical understanding of why things work. And what does the theoretical understanding tell you about your patient? A pause. That he should be improving, but he isn't. No. You look at each other. I think, you say carefully, because you're in a room in a manor house, and this man has a degree from a university, and you have no degree and no Latin and no institutional protection, and you need to say this in a way that he can actually hear. that sometimes the observation is more important than the theory. If the observation and the theory disagree, perhaps the theory needs revision, he says. I was going to say another look. Something shifts in his face. Not quite a smile, but something. Stay, he says. While I'm here. Watch him with me. You stay. The steward lives. This is not solely your doing. It's also not solely the physician's doing. The honest account is, he was sick, he was going to get better, or going to get worse. And what happened was that the combined effort of two people who knew different things about illness, who were willing to actually look at what were happening in front of them, instead of what their training told them should be happening, helped tip him toward better instead of worse. The elder, preparation, given regularly, the food, including the garlic, including the broth, the window open a small amount, the stopping of the white hellebore. In 3 days the steward's fever breaks. In a week he's sitting up and eating. The physician is there when this happens. He looks at you across the sick room with the look of a man in the middle of reconsidering something substantial. The elder, he says again at the gate as you're leaving. The elder, the thyme, the garlic, the food, you say. And the window. The air matters, you say. I don't know why, but the air matters. He's quiet for a moment. Will you write this down, he says. If I sent a clerk, I can't write. If I sent a clerk to write what you said. You think about Brother Thomas on the Priory Hill, about the conversation at the gate, about the woman in Harbridge. Send your clerk to Marjorie at the mill, you say. She knows more than I do, and she's old enough not to be afraid of it being written. He looks at you, understanding the space between what you've said and what you haven't. And you, he says, I'll think about it, you say. The same thing you told Marjorie. You walk home through the manor gate and back along the path toward the village. The physician watches you go. You don't look back. Summer in 1347 arrives the way it always does. Not all at once, but in accumulation. The hedgerows filling in, going from their thin spring outline to the full thick mass of high summer. The fields showing green, then greener. The days lengthening so gradually that you only notice when you suddenly realise it's almost full dark at what used to be full dark and now feels early. You track the seasons by your shelves. The spring preparations dwindle as summer gives you fresh things to work with. The dried elder is replaced by fresh elderflower. The umbels of cream-white flowers that appear in June, smelling of something between honey and summer rain, which you gather in quantities and use fresh, and dry in the rest, and make a wine from the excess that is in fact genuinely good, and which Thomas drinks in the evenings with the expression of a man who's earned something. The garden is at its abundance. You planted everything with the timing your mother taught you, and the timing your observation has confirmed, and now the results are coming in. The peas are flowering, the onions have fattened in their rows, the beans are climbing the poles you wove from hazel sticks in spring, covering them now with a bright green of productive plants. In the woods, the chanterelle mushrooms are coming up in the oaken beech stands, yellow gold, funnel-shaped, smelling of apricots and earth, unmistakable to you and dangerous to someone who doesn't know what they're doing, because there are similar-looking mushrooms nearby that would make you extremely ill. This is the fundamental division in the knowledge of wild foods, the knowing and the not knowing. In the knowing there's abundance, in the not knowing there's danger. The difference is exactly the kind of patient, walked, accumulated knowledge that took generations to build. You take Agnes. You take her everywhere the knowledge is. You show her the chanterelle and show her the false chanterelle nearby. Similar colour, similar shape, but the gill's different, the smell different, the feel of it under your thumb different in a way that is hard to describe in words but very easy to demonstrate. This one, you say, and not this one. Right, what's the difference? She studies them. The way her face focuses when she's studying a plant now has changed from the open wonder of the spring to something more analytical. She's learning to look for the specific thing. The gills, she says. The gills on this one, she points to the false one, go all the way down the stem. The real one's gills don't. Right. And the smell is different. How? She bends and smells the real one, then the false one, straightens up. The real one is... there's something sweet. The other one just smells like dirt. Not just dirt, but yes, something sweet. You'll learn to smell it from a distance, eventually. She picks up the real chanterelle carefully and puts it in the basket with the expression of someone performing a trusted role. William beside her picks up the other one. Don't, she says. He puts it down. He's 8 now, and he still does this. Picks up things to see what happens. But he listens to his sister. Summer evenings are different from every other kind of evening. After the children are asleep and Thomas is by the fire with his repair work and the baby, almost 2 now, walking, a constant small catastrophe of enthusiasm, is finally still. You go to the garden. This is your time. Not much of it. Maybe half an hour between the children sleeping and the darkness making garden work impossible. But in the long June evenings the darkness comes late and the garden is still warm from the day's sun, and you can work in a kind of peace that doesn't exist at any other hour. You deadhead the chamomile, a whole bed of it, sprawling and fragrant, the smell intensifying as you brush through it with your hands. You collect the dried heads into a basket. Run your fingers through the fresh ones, feeling them release their smell into the still air. It's a clean smell, a certain smell, the smell of something with properties you trust. You check the yarrow, already gone tall, its flat-topped white flower head standing above the other herbs. The yarrow is always reliable. Yarrow grows everywhere, in the hedgerows, in the waste ground by the road, in the meadow if you know where to look. But the yarrow you've planted in the garden is the finest, because you selected the best plants from the hedgerow over years, replanting the most productive ones, and the bed has improved. This is another form of the knowledge. Not just gathering, cultivating, selecting, improving over time the quality of what you work with. You're doing what humans have been doing since before history, noticing which plants are best and planting their seeds, which plants are most useful and propagating them, so that the landscape you work in is not just wild nature, but nature shaped by human attention over generations. The monks in the Priory Physic Garden are doing the same thing with their seeds from the Levant. They're doing it consciously, with records and intentions. You're doing it by instinct and observation. The results are not so different. It's on a July evening in the garden that you first hear the word. Not from anyone in the village. From the carrier, the man who brings goods from the market town 8 miles away, who comes through Stoneham every second week with his cart and his news and his tendency to talk at length about things he's only half understood. He stops in the road outside your garden gate. Heard something from a man. At market, he says, with the opening formula that means he's about to tell you something. You straighten up from the chamomile. A sickness, he says, in the south, in the ports, men coming off ships. You wait. Bad sickness. Fast, they say. He pauses, not for drama, but because he's trying to remember the exact words. They say a man can be well in the morning and dead by evening. The garden is very still. What ports, you say? Bristol, someone said. Maybe Southampton. Maybe further. He shrugs. Could be exaggeration. You know how news travels. You know how news travels. You also know that news of a specific type, news about sickness, news about death, news that travels at the speed of fear, tends to arrive reduced, not expanded. People don't make up sicknesses, they minimize them. When did you hear this? Last week. From a man who came from Bristol. Is it in Marlborough? Any sign of it? Nothing I heard. Thank you for telling me, you say. He nods, moves, on with his cart. You stand in the garden with your hands smelling of chamomile and the July evening warm around you and think about ships coming into Bristol Harbour. You don't say anything to Thomas that night. You don't say anything to anyone that night. You think. The next morning you're at your shelves earlier than usual. You look at them not as a daily inventory, but as a strategic survey. What do you have? What are you low on? What should you gather more of before what you don't know? You have a vague shape of a fear without the specific content to fill it. But you've been watching weather long enough to know that certain shapes in the sky mean certain things. And the shape of what the carrier said has a weather pattern quality that you don't like. You make a list in your head, not on paper, in your head. Elder, not enough. You need to gather and dry more, set some to wine. Elder is your primary preparation for illness that goes into the chest, that pulls down the lungs, that makes people breathe badly. Yarrow, good supply. Keep harvesting and drying through summer. Garlic. The garden bed is producing. Harvest some early, dry it, store it. The wound preparations. Enough. But more never hurts, and wound work will be at its peak in the next few weeks. Marjorie. You need to talk to Marjorie. Marjorie listens to your account of the carrier's news without interrupting. Her hands are better in the summer. The warmth helps them. She holds her cup of elder wine. She accepted your wine-making project with the enthusiasm of someone who had been hoping for exactly this, and she listens. Bristol, she says when you've finished. That's what he said. Bristol is far away. Yes. And the news could be exaggerated. Yes. Marjorie looks at her cup. In my grandmother's time, she says, there was a sickness, not in this village, 3 villages east. It came one summer and it was gone by autumn, and it took. She pauses, calculating. 1/3 of the village with it. You look at her. She said it came with rumour first. People said they'd heard of sickness in the south, and then it was there. What sickness? I don't know what name it had. I know what she said about it. She said the skin went wrong. Black in places. The garden is warm. The summer flies are thick in the air. What do you still have of her preparations, you say? Marjorie looks at her shelves, her remarkable shelves, dense with things from 7 decades of knowledge. What she used, Marjorie says slowly, was not for the sickness itself. She said nothing worked on the sickness itself. You either lived or you didn't. What she used was for keeping other things away while people were sick. The infected rooms, she kept them smelling of burning herbs, rosemary and wormwood, and a third thing whose name I don't know in English. What does it look like? I'll show you when it flowers. It's in the garden. You lean forward. And the people who took it, or the preparations, did they do better? Marjorie is quiet for a long moment. Some did, she says. Not all, but she believed it helped. She said the sickness preferred rooms that smelled wrong, and that strong herb smoke kept rooms smelling right. This is not the germ theory of disease. This is not even close to the germ theory of disease. But Marjorie's grandmother noticed something. She observed that rooms with burning herbs had better outcomes than rooms without. She passed the observation to her daughter, who passed it to Marjorie, and somewhere in the observation, embedded in the accumulated empirical note-taking of a woman who watched and remembered and passed it on, there's something that points, however obliquely, at a real mechanism. Some herbs, burned in a closed room, produce smoke that has antimicrobial properties. You will not know that word for 500 years. But the observation that led to the knowledge came from a woman just like you, watching what worked and what didn't, in a sick room, in a village, in a summer that was either going to be ordinary or wasn't. Teach me the third plant, you say, when it flowers, and I'll make more of the elder preparation than I was planning. And the willow bark preparation, Marjorie says, for fever, make as much as you can. Willow is in the stream side, it's cheap, it's everywhere. Make more than you think you'll need. How much more? Marjorie looks at you with her 70-year-old eyes, her sharp blue eyes that have seen things you haven't yet. More than that, she says. September. The harvest is in. This statement sounds like relief, and it is. The harvest coming in is the yearly resolution of the anxiety that starts in spring and lives underneath everything until the grain is cut and dried and stored. But it's also the beginning of the enormous work of autumn. You process everything. The garden in September is at the last of its abundance and moving quickly toward the end. You harvest the chamomile heads and dry them in the flat wicker trays in the loft space above the main room, where the warmth rises and the air moves and things dry well without going mouldy. You harvest the yarrow and tie it in bundles and hang it from the beams. The thyme cut back hard, the tough stems left to survive winter and grow again in spring, the sage, the rosemary, the ground elder, all of it processed, sorted, hung or dried or prepared. The garden onions laid out on the ground in the September sun to cure their skins, then braided into ropes and hung. The beans shelled and dried, hours of shelling, your fingers working through piles of dried pods, the shells crackling, the beans clicking into the bowl, the smell of dried beans around you like a dust. Agnes helps now, reliably. Her small fingers are fast and she doesn't need to think about it, which means she can talk while she works, which she does, the running commentary of a 5-year-old who is always processing the world out loud. When will the nettles come back? March. That's far. It always feels far in September. The mushrooms, the chanterelles, but also the seps, which come later, and the field mushrooms that appear in the short-cropped grass of the meadow. You've been teaching Agnes and William to find them. William is reliable with the field mushrooms now, which grow in the classic round white domes of something that looks exactly like what it is. Agnes is reliable with the chanterelles. Seps, porcini, though you don't call them that, are William's newest project, because they're larger and more dramatic, and he's at the age where drama is motivating. The elder, you gathered 3 times the usual amount as you'd planned. The berries hang heavy and dark on the elder trees at the wood edge, clusters the size of your fist, deep wine purple, the smell of them rich and slightly fermented in the warm September sun. You gathered buckets of them, dried some, put some to the wine. You make in the big ceramic jar, prepared some into the concentrated decoction that you filled more pots with than you ever have before. Your shelves are full in a way that is different from previous autumns, Thomas noticed. You're expecting something, he said. He doesn't ask what. He knows you. He knows the way you think. He knows that when you over-prepare, It's because something is pulling at the edge of your attention. I heard something in the summer, you said, from the carrier, about a sickness in the ports. Thomas was quiet. Bristol was mentioned, you said. He went to the window and looked out at the village in the September light. Has Marjorie heard anything? She heard what she heard, and she remembers her grandmother's stories. Thomas knows Marjorie's grandmother's stories. Everyone in the village of a certain age knows Marjorie's grandmother's stories, the same way all villages have their institutional memory of disasters past, the same way that knowledge of what to do when things go wrong gets stored in the oldest people and passed outward. I'll talk to the other men, he said, about the grain stores, about making sure they're full before they're needed. Yes. This is the practical knowledge working at the level of the whole village, not just one household. The instinct to prepare, the understanding that preparation in the good time is what makes the bad time survivable, the knowledge that abundance is not a moment to relax, but a moment to work harder, to store and preserve and prepare for what might be coming. The monks in their library have the Book of Revelation. You have Marjorie and the carrier and the memory of a grandmother you never met. Both tell you to pay attention to dark signs on the horizon. The news that arrives in October is more specific. A traveller this time, a man going through the village on his way north, who stopped at the inn, who talked. It's in Dorset, he said, coming up from the coast, a sickness unlike anything anyone alive has seen. He described what it looked like. You listen to this description standing by the inn wall, and your face stays still and your hands stay still, and something inside you goes very quiet and very cold. The black swellings, the fever that comes fast and goes high, the smell, he said. He hesitated on this, and then described it anyway, in the matter-of-fact way that people who've been very close to death describe things. The skin that goes dark at the edges. Marjorie's grandmother's story. How far away, you ask? 3 days' ride south, he says. Maybe 4. 3 days' ride. You don't run. Running would spread the panic faster than the information, and panic is less useful than clear thought. You walk home. You sit down at your table and you think for a long time while the fire burns in the centre of the room, and Thomas watches you from across it. Then you tell him what the traveller said. He listens. 3 days' ride, he says, 4 maybe. And what do you know about it? From Marjorie? From anything? This is the question. This is the question that your whole life of accumulated knowledge is supposed to answer. And the honest answer is, not enough. You know what Marjorie knows, which is what her grandmother observed, which is some things about what helped, and some things about what didn't, and nothing about the sickness itself, about what it is, or why it comes, or how it moves. Nobody in England in 1347 knows what the Black Death is. Nobody in the world knows. The word bacteria will not exist for centuries. The mechanism, the fleas, the rats, the ship routes, the way a pathogen travels with trade goods from Central Asia to the Mediterranean to the English coast, is entirely invisible to every person living. The physicians know it's an imbalance of humours caused by bad air and the influence of a particular alignment of Saturn and Jupiter and Mars that the astrologers calculated and that the medical faculties of the great universities have published extensive documents about. They are wrong in every detail. You don't know that they're wrong, but you also don't have their specific wrong theory, and so you're starting from a different place. Observation. What your grandmother said, filtered through Marjorie, what the traveller described, what your own experience of illness tells you. The preparations I've made, you say, They won't stop it. I don't think anything stops it. Thomas is very still. But they might help people survive it. The willow bark for fever, the elder for the chest, and we need to keep the sick rooms aired. Marjorie said her grandmother was clear about air in the sick rooms. And keeping people separate. The sick from the well. You look at him. This is instinct. He's arrived at it without anyone teaching it to him, from the simple logic of a man who works outdoors and can see when something spreads from one animal to another. Yes, you say. I think so. I'll talk to the other men tomorrow. You nod. He gets up and comes to sit beside you on the bench, not saying anything. Just there, solid and warm, and his own specific smell of outdoors and leatherwork and the wood smoke that lives in both of you. Outside, the October night is already cold. The village is quiet. Somewhere, 3 days to the south, it's coming. Here is what you know and what you do with it. The elder, you give it to anyone who is sick, early, before the fever gets high. You can't know whether it helps against this specific sickness. You know it helps against the illnesses of the chest and fever that you've treated before. It's what you have. The willow bark for fever, given in a preparation that is bitter and stringent and that you know keeps fever from climbing to the point where it kills on its own, the point where the body burns up what it needs, the clean water. You're insistent on this. Water for the sick from the clean source, not the lower stream that has been used by many people and animals upstream. Hot water, the washing of hands, the rooms. You don't understand infection. But you've been watching illness move through households for years, and you've noticed that the households where sick people are kept separately, where their linens are washed, where the windows are opened sometimes despite the cold, do better than households where everything is shared and closed. You tell people this. You say it plainly without a theoretical framework, because you don't have one. You say, put the sick person in a separate space, wash what they touch, get air through the room every day. Wash your hands when you've been with them. Some people listen, some don't. The ones who do, some of them survive things that kill their neighbours, and you can't know, and you won't ever know, whether it was the elder preparation or the willow bark or the separation or the clean water or the opening of windows or simply the ordinary lottery of who a pathogen chooses. You can't run a controlled trial. You have no statistics and no language for statistics. You have observation. You have pattern. You have the accumulated observations of every farmwife before you, every grandmother who watched and remembered and passed it on. It's not enough to stop what's coming, but it's something. The winter that follows is the hardest winter of your life, not from cold, though the cold is real, from what comes through the village. This is not the historical record of the Black Death in Stoneham, Wiltshire. That record doesn't exist. The village of Stoneham isn't in any chronicle. The farmwife Joan Hayward isn't in any document. Her name won't appear anywhere that will survive to be read by historians. But in villages like Stoneham, across England, across Europe, in the winter of 1347 and the years immediately following, something like this happens. A third, sometimes more, sometimes less. The familiar faces that stop being there. The children who were there in the autumn and aren't there in the spring. You attend 17 deaths that winter. You attend them the way you attend births, not with what's theoretically correct, but with what you have. The preparations you've made, the clean cloths and the hot water, and the presence of someone who doesn't panic, who does what can be done, who sits with people through the thing that is happening. Some of them you can't help. The ones where it goes very fast, where the fever is so high so quickly that the willow bark can't keep pace with it. The ones where the swellings come and there's nothing you have for swellings. You lose old Marjorie in January. She's 71 and she's been failing since before the sickness came. The joints and the tremor and the way she's been getting thinner since the autumn. The sickness finds her when she's already running low, and she's gone in 4 days. You sit with her at the end. She dies in her own bed, which is not nothing. She dies with clean linens and warm fire, and the smell of rosemary in the air because you brought rosemary and burned it in the room, which helps you more than it helps her, probably. But there's something in the attending to the small right things when the large things are out of reach. She dies with her eyes open, looking at you. You'll remember it, she says near the end. Not a question. I'll remember it. All of it. The things I showed you. All of it. Her eyes close. Her breathing continues for a while and then it doesn't. March again. Your second march in this story, or your 27th march in your life. Hard to say which counting matters more. The birds are back. The robin in the eave. His 3rd season now, which means he's older than most of his species' life expectancy, which is itself a small miracle. He starts before dawn, as he always has. The frost on the ground, the embers in the hearth, your feet on the cold floor, the baby. Not a baby anymore, properly. She's walking and talking and has opinions about everything with the specific passionate authority of almost 2. She's asleep in the cradle, heavy sleep, the sleep of a child who stayed up too late and is now comprehensively unconscious. Agnes and William on their pallet, Thomas breathing beside you. You lie for a moment before getting up. Inventory. Your family, all present and breathing. This winter, which took Marjorie and the miller's youngest son and 3 others you knew well, and others you knew less well. Your family came through. You can't know why. The lottery, maybe. The preparation, maybe. The clean hands and the elder wine and the separation of the sick room and the open windows. Maybe all of it. Maybe none of it. Maybe something else entirely. What you know is that they're here. That when you put your hand out in the dark, Thomas is warm beside you, and the children are breathing in the corner, and the baby's small sighing is there. That's enough. More than enough. You get up. The fire, the goats, the morning. And on the shelves the winter stores dwindle, the preparations used, the jars emptied and ready to be refilled. The bundles that were full in October now thin, the smell of them faded, the colour gone. You look at your shelves and make the list. In 4 weeks, 6 at most, the nettles will be up. The hawthorn buds will be swelling in the hedgerow, where you showed Agnes the first green beginning. The ramsons will be pushing through the dark soil under the alder trees by the stream, and the smell of them will hit you 10 feet away, that sharp, alive smell that means something has started again. You'll take Agnes. You'll walk the hedgerow together, her small hand in yours when the path is narrow, released when it isn't. You'll show her the plant and say its name and let her feel the texture of the leaf and smell it. You'll show her the one to take and the one to leave. You'll show her how much to take and how to leave the root. She's 5 now. She'll remember more this year than she did last year. She's at the age where the knowledge starts sticking, where the walk through the hedgerow becomes a map that stays in her mind. And one day she'll walk this same hedgerow with her own daughter. She'll point at the hawthorn buds and say, "Not yet, remember where this is." She'll show the ramsons and say, "Smell it. This smell means this." She'll tell her daughter where the yantrels come up under the oaks in August, and where the elderberries hang in September, and which preparation to use for the deep chest cough, and how to sit with a labouring woman, and how to wash your hands before you do. She won't write any of it down. It won't be in any book, but it won't be lost either. And here is what the monk, still in his library, still copying Galen, still doesn't know. He doesn't know that the plant preparations you've been using contain compounds that measurable, testable science will one day validate. The willow bark that you use for fever contains salicylic acid, the precursor of aspirin, a compound that genuinely reduces fever and genuinely helps with pain. It works. It works because of chemistry, not because of observation, but you arrived at the same destination as the chemistry through the observation. The elder preparations contain compounds, flavonoids, anthocyanins, that have demonstrable effects on respiratory viruses, effects that laboratory studies in your unimaginable future will confirm with double-blind trials and peer-reviewed publications. The elder works, not magic, chemistry. But you found the chemistry before anyone had a word for chemistry because you watched. The garlic that you insisted on in the steward's broth contains allicin, a compound with antimicrobial properties, which is why putting it in the broth of a man with a lung infection, even through the whole indirect route of cooking and eating, is better than not putting it in. The chamomile that you grow and dry and steep and give to children with fevers contains apigenin, a compound with anti-inflammatory and mild sedative properties. The chamomile tea you give a sick child is doing something real. The woundwort that you packed into Thomas's cut hand, the Stasis sylvatica, contains compounds that inhibit the growth of certain bacteria, not because anyone knew about bacteria, because generations of observation established that this plant in a wound reduced the likelihood of the wound going bad, and that observation was correct. And it was passed from mother to daughter in an unbroken chain that stretches back beyond any record. The washing of hands before attending a birth, the most important thing, the thing that saves more lives than anything else. The thing that the Semmelweis of your future will discover and publish and be dismissed for and die in an asylum unbelieved, because the scientific establishment of his time couldn't accept that a doctor's hands could transmit death from one patient to another. You just do it. You don't publish anything. You don't argue with anyone. You just wash your hands, and the women you attend have better outcomes, and nobody notices except the women, because the women are watching. The air in the sick rooms, the separation of the sick from the well, the clean water from the clean source. These things that you do by instinct and by Marjorie's teaching and by your own observation, they matter. They don't cure the plague, which is a bacterium called Yersinia pestis that travels via flea, via rat, via ship, via trade route, and which no herb in your garden can touch at the level of the mechanism. But they can keep a sick room from giving the sick person a second illness on top of the first. They can keep a fever from going higher than it needs to go. They can give a depleted body the nutrition it needs to fight what it's fighting. They can reduce the transmission of the secondary infections that kill people who survive the first assault. Every physician at the universities of Oxford and Paris and Bologna is doing worse than this. Not because they're bad people, not because they're stupid, because the framework they're working in, the humours, the celestial influences, the bloodletting, the ancient texts, is wrong, and a wrong framework applied rigorously produces wrong outcomes, however elegant the theory. Your framework is observation. Your method is, does it work? Your library is the accumulated knowledge of every woman who came before you in this village and every village like it. Passed through hands and walks and kitchens and sick rooms, without ever passing through a single page of parchment. That knowledge is not inferior to the monk's knowledge because it isn't written down. If anything, it's been tested in conditions that no scholarly text has ever been tested in. April now, properly spring. The village has come through the winter diminished. The faces that are missing are missed with the specific weight of the newly gone. The people who were there at harvest and aren't there at planting, but the village is alive. More than a third of the villages in England cannot say the same thing. The fields are ploughed, the seeds are in, the birds are back. Tonight, after the children are asleep and Thomas has gone up ahead of you, you sit by the fire alone for a moment. This is rare. This is almost never. The moment when the house is quiet and your hands are still and there's just the fire and you. The flames are ordinary flames, small, contained, doing their work. The wood smoke rises to the hole in the thatch. The shadows move on the walls. You look at your shelves. They're thinner than they were in the autumn. The winter took what you had. But there are fresh things already. The dried nettles from the first gathering last week, hanging green and new from the beam. The first small jar of the elderflower water you made from the earliest flowers, which appeared ahead of schedule in the warm April sun. A small, wrapped bundle of the ramsons you and Agnes gathered yesterday, pungent and alive. The knowledge is restoring itself, as it always does, as it always will. You think about Brother Thomas on the hill, his dirty hands, his willingness to ask. You think about the physician at the manor who sat with the steward and watched and reconsidered. You think about the clerk who went to Marjorie in the end, who sat with Marjorie for 4 afternoons in January before the sickness came and wrote. You think about what Marjorie said, the record. Things written down survive differently from things carried in memory. Things carried in memory are vulnerable to what is always vulnerable. The chain of hands, the chain of women, the uninterrupted line of mothers to daughters that requires no crisis to break it. Because a crisis always comes. What if the daughter dies before the granddaughter is old enough to learn? What if the line breaks? The monk's Galen is 1500 years old and still being read. The knowledge in your shelves, the knowledge in your hands, in your nose, in the way you walk through the hedgerow, is as old or older, and it exists only in you and Agnes and the memory of Marjorie who is now gone. You think about the clerk. You think about what it would mean to say out loud the things you know, to have someone write them down, not the Latin of Galen and Avicenna, not the humoral framework, just what works, what you've seen work, what the women before you saw work. The fire pops and settles. It's a risk. You know it's a risk. The woman in Harbridge is always there, at the edge of the thinking, but Marjorie is gone, and the knowledge on your shelves is what she left you. And the thing about knowledge that no one tells you, the thing you've learned in 26 years of watching the world, is that knowledge not passed on is knowledge lost. That's the only loss that can't be recovered. Time is different when you step back from it. Inside the days, time is fast and specific. The morning milking and the garden and the children's shoes and the grain stores and the fire that needs feeding. Granular time, each moment requiring something. But from further back, time is the thing that carries everything else. The thing that takes the specific moments and makes them into a life, makes the life into a pattern, makes the pattern into something that outlasts the person who lived it. You're 26 years old in March of 1347. You are, by the reckoning of your world, a woman in the middle of her life. Not old. Some women in the village live to Marjorie's age and beyond, but no longer young, in the sense that your body has done enough to no longer be considered the beginning. You've already lived more than half of what many women in your time and place will live, but the knowledge you carry, the knowledge in your hands and your nose and your walks and your shelves, that's older than you by generations and younger than you because you're still adding to it, still learning, still watching, still noting what works and what doesn't. In another 20 years, Agnes will be here. Her hands will know the goats and the garden and the shelves. Her nose will know the difference between the right time and the old time, the good elder and the elder past its useful time. She'll walk the hedgerow with her children the way you walk it with her now. And the knowledge will continue, not in books, not in universities, not in the Latin of learned men who will be cited as argued over and reprinted and translated across centuries, in hands, in walks, in kitchens that smell of wood smoke and herbs, in the spaces where mothers show daughters the world and say this one, not that one, smell it, feel it, remember where this is. The fire is low now, your eyes are heavy with the weight of a day that was long before you let yourself stop. Outside, the April night is cold and clear. The stars are out. You can see them through the thatch smoke when the wind shifts slightly, brilliant and indifferent. The same stars that hung over your grandmother and her grandmother and every woman before them, stretching back to the beginning of fire and shelves and the knowledge of green things. Tomorrow, the garden. The elder flowers will need checking. They're coming on fast in this warmth and you need to gather them before they peak and fall. Agnes will come. You'll show her the smell at the right moment, the dusty sweetness that means they're ready. You'll tell her not yet or yes now, and she'll file it away in the part of her mind that is building its own version of your library. Tomorrow, the goats, the morning milk, the fire, but that's tomorrow. Right now there's just this, the fire saying its quiet fire things, the ash settling, the smell of wood smoke and dried lavender, and the faint ghost of the ramsons you cooked for supper, that green sharp good smell. Your shelves in the firelight, the bundles and pots and jars, everything that you know holding its shape in the dark, your children breathing, you're warm enough, fed enough, safe enough, you've earned this rest. The knowledge is there, on the shelves, the elder and the yarrow and the woundwort and the chamomile, the preparations that work and the preparations that help, and the preparations that sit at the back of the shelf for the specific situation that you hope doesn't come. It's all there, and tomorrow you'll add to it, and the day after. And Agnes will take it from you when the time comes, and she'll add to it, and her children will take it from her. The chain continues. The chain has always continued. Let the fire go down now. Let the shadows take the room. Let the sounds settle, the creak of the roof timbers, the small movements of sleeping children, the distant complaint of a night bird somewhere past the garden wall. Let your hands go still, the hands that have been moving since before the cock crowed this morning, at the fire, at the pot, at the shelves, at the goats, at the hedgerow, at the herb bundles and the baskets, and the lives that came to your door today needing something you had. Those hands can rest now. They've done enough, more than enough. Centuries will pass. The cottage you sleep in tonight will be dust before your great-grandchildren's grandchildren are born. The village of Stoneham will change beyond anything you would recognize. The fields will be reorganized. The thatch will be replaced by tile. The open fire in the centre of the room will become a hearth in a wall, and then a stove, and then something else entirely that has no name yet in your world. The river of time will carry so much away. But people will still grow things in gardens. They will still walk in hedgerows. They will still pick up a plant and smell it to know what it is and what it does. Researchers in laboratories with equipment that would look to you like pure sorcery will run tests on the preparations your grandmother's grandmother used and confirm in the language of chemistry and biology what she observed with her hands. The elder will test positive in double-blind trials. The willow bark will become aspirin. The woundwork will show antimicrobial activity in petri dishes. And someone, somewhere, writing about this will say, traditional knowledge, empirical observation, folk medicine, and what they'll mean underneath those careful academic words is a woman by a fire, in March, with her hands in the cold and her eyes on the shelves, knowing what she knew, doing what could be done, passing it on. That's all. That was always all, and it was enough. Let sleep come the way the spring comes, not all at once, but in accumulation, the edge of cold giving way to warmth, the darkness thinning, the birds starting somewhere outside with the first of them, the robin, always the robin first, but not yet, not for a little while. Right now, there's just the dark and the fire's last, breath and the sound of the village settling into its night. The same village it was yesterday, the same village it will be tomorrow. Your village, your shelves, your children, your fire. Let it go. Let the morning come when it comes. Let the robin wake you. You'll be ready. You always have been. Good night.